So first of all, welcome to Cisco Live. Is this anyone's first session of the week? Raise your hand. Hopefully most of us, right? It's just the beginning here on Monday. So thank you so much for spending the time here together at Cisco Live and throughout this entire week. Today we're going to focus on an SNMP-free journey and how to navigate that. So we'll be focused on how to unlock real-time insights, and we'll use model-driven telemetry, or MDT, to do this. So here's an overview of the different topics that we'll go through today. We'll talk a little bit about SNMP, of course. We'll talk about why programmability. We'll get into some Yang data models, because this is the how behind how we can actually use programmability. We'll get into device monitoring, so again, model-driven telemetry, MDT. And we'll focus on some demos and examples about how you can start or how you can continue on your SNMP-free journey. We'll also go into some tooling that you can use to help as you're going through and navigating your journey. So this includes the Yang Suite tooling, as well as Ansible and Terraform. We'll wrap up with some resources, so things that you can do for the rest of this week here at Cisco Live, as well as some resources that you can take home. So this could be things that you could read, for example, and access to some hands-on labs. And lastly, we will wrap up after that. Can everyone still hear me okay? Okay, great, great. If you haven't already, you can join the WebEx space for this session, and you'll see that for the rest of this week, many of the sessions or labs that you attend will all have their own WebEx spaces. So here you can ask questions throughout this session today, as well as we'll be monitoring this space, myself and the team, to be able to answer any questions that you may have even after the session in the next week or so. So to get started, first of all, a quick show of hands. Who has a complex network? Probably most of us, right? I see a lot of hands. Yes, we all have very complex networks, and they're becoming more and more complex, right? We're getting more devices on our networks. Maybe we're turning on different features. We have different applications and capabilities. So we all have complex networks, and they're ever-changing, ever-growing. And with these changes, we have more data than ever before. We need to get more data faster, and we need to collect it for longer periods of time, typically. So here, this is just the beginning or the why behind your SNMP-free journey. I want to highlight just a few things here first, and we'll get into more details as we go throughout the session and learn about the different capabilities here. But what you'll notice at a high level is we're comparing the different model-driven telemetry capabilities. So that will be the ones at the top, the gNMI, the gRPC, the netconf, and the restconf. We're comparing all of those to SNMP. And what is the takeaway here? It's a lower cost for us to use model-driven telemetry, a lower CPU cost, and we're getting more data as we're going through this process. So what do I mean by that? With SNMP, in this test that we ran, essentially this was a 60-minute interval, and we were collecting data at every 60 seconds. And for SNMP, we were only collecting this interface data, so we were only getting interfaces here. Whereas for all of the other model-driven telemetry capabilities, all of these at the top, we were actually collecting 17 different features. So we were collecting, of course, interfaces as well as many other features. We were getting that data all at the same time. So you can see with SNMP, we had a 6% CPU impact here, whereas with model-driven telemetry, it's about 2, 3, maybe 4%. So again, we'll get into the details of this later, but this is just the why behind it. And I think there was a question towards the front here.
Yeah. So is that how is it exponential change if you're this is obviously based on 60-minute intervals, right?
This is a great question. So you're asking about what are we actually saying here? And the point that we're trying to make with this slide is that the SNMP will cost more than model-driven telemetry, and you've mentioned in your experience it seems a little bit different. So to address that, it's essentially based upon the specific features that you're collecting. So we'll get into the Yang shortly, but essentially it depends on every Yang model or every feature that you have. They will have a different amount of data that's actually coming with that. So if you're seeing a higher impact, perhaps you're gathering things like the native model, so everything that's in the running config. Whereas here we're looking at a few different specific features. But we can talk more about this offline too, about the specific comparisons here. Great question. So overall, this is the premise, is that typically our SNMP will be a higher cost or it will take longer than model-driven telemetry here. So the implication is that SNMP isn't able to keep up with our ever-changing and ever-growing networks. And we're seeing an overall industry shift of moving away from SNMP and moving towards model-driven telemetry here. So throughout this session today, one sort of ask that I have for you is to consider what is one way that you could start or continue on your SNMP-free journey. So maybe you're just at the very beginning stages. Of course, you don't need to remove all of SNMP and move towards model-driven telemetry in one day. No one expects you to do that. But perhaps you could take one key feature that you're interested in collecting more frequently, one that's very important to you in understanding how your network is actually functioning, and to quickly and easily view the anomalies in that particular feature. And the benefit, of course, is when you see these anomalies, when you're able to see the trends over time and pick out when something seems different or something seems wrong, you can more easily and quickly troubleshoot and move forward with getting people back online if there's a network issue, or everyone can continue focusing on moving forward with the business. So we mentioned here we're moving away from SNMP and towards model-driven telemetry, and we'll do this at incremental steps. And to do that, we need to understand a little bit about programmability. So is anyone using programmability today? Any automation? I see a few hands, so yes, some of us are. Today we'll be focused on the enterprise networking side, so IOS XE, that's the type of automation and Yang data models that we'll actually be focused on. So why do we actually use programmability, or what is the benefit? For the few of you who raised your hands, yes, does anyone have a reason why you use programmability you'd like to share? Standardization, yes. Sorry?
Compliance checks.
Compliance checks. Standardizing, yes. Yes, exactly. We're able to more easily standardize, and this is very helpful when we're wanting to either configure our devices all in the same way or get telemetry data from all of our devices and look at those, compare all of that data, and see what exactly is going on within our network. So in addition to these concepts like standardization, we have improved operational efficiency, because when things are standardized, we're able to actually be a little bit more efficient about how we are maybe troubleshooting or how we're going about solving a problem that we may see. Overall, this will reduce our operational costs as well. And this is actually where a lot of customers are spending a lot of their time, is working on solving or sorting through outages. So this will help you with going through these types of problems and navigating these situations. And of course, faster service deployment as well. So when we're talking about programmability and automation, there are a few reasons why people might be hesitant or why they might not want to start with programmability and automation. So we're going to try to debunk some of those things or try to work through and talk through some of those. So the first one is manual network management. So is anyone on like CLI today and actually going in and configuring. Yes, I see a few hands, very proud. Yes, this is a great way to configure your network devices, of course. However, there are some issues. For example, if you are, of course, configuring many different devices all at once, it's a little bit harder to scale, or it's a little bit harder to troubleshoot if, for example, one device is maybe not configured in exactly the same way as the others. Another reason is sometimes there's some legacy network infrastructure that's going on, and that might be a prohibitor or reason why we're not looking to use programmability and automation today. Some users are saying that this makes it a little bit harder to automate. And so, of course, at Cisco, we're continuing to invest in programmability and automation and making these features and capabilities available to you. And the last one is the lack of skill, or maybe the knowledge that you don't know exactly how programmability and automation works, or how to move forward with it. So of course today in this session, this is at least step one to understand how you can take away some programmability and automation fundamentals and move forward with those. So I have a quick comparison here of why we may want to move beyond SNMP and move towards model-driven telemetry, towards our MDT. So SNMP was actually created, designed, and became official in the late 80s here. So this was before the cloud and DevOps and very extremely large networks with many different devices were top of mind. In today's society, networks typically have very complex components to them, as we've discussed. And one part of this is, for example, using or leveraging AI within your networks. This obviously makes them much more complex, and model-driven telemetry is more prepared to set you up for success. With model-driven telemetry as well, you have multiple different capabilities. So you can do pull or a push operation. And of course, there's added security benefits with the MTLS operation. So the mutual TLS here, confirming that you are who you say you are before gaining access. And then, of course, there's the native automation pipelines. So this could be CI/CD pipelines and other toolings such as Ansible, Terraform, and our visualization tools. So that could be Grafana, it could be Splunk, it could be another tool to actually see these trends. So this is a little bit about iOS XE and the software that we're actually talking about here. So of course, we're using the Silicon One. And when we describe programmability and automation, it essentially sits in the heart of everything that we're doing within our networks. So we have controllers, we have third-party tools over here, and then you'll see in the middle, this is where we're actually talking about programmability and automation. And what we mean by that is there's different days or different cycles that you can actually go through. So for day 0, when we're talking about this concept, we're describing onboarding or initializing our iOS XE devices quickly, efficiently, and at scale. For the day 1, this is our model-driven programmability. So for example, using tools to actually go out and configure our devices programmatically. And then we have our model-driven telemetry. So that will be the major focus of today's session, is we're going to look at our telemetry data, how we can collect it, where we can collect it, and how we can actually visualize that data. And then, of course, software management. Day N will be things like our image upgrades. It could focus on things that are more advanced use cases, such as application hosting on our devices as well. So there are many different options that you have for programmability and automation within the iOS XE software. So to dig just a little bit deeper here, so for the day 0 operation, this is when we're talking about onboarding our devices with zero-touch provisioning. Does anyone use this today? I see one hand. Okay, great, a couple hands here. Maybe 3 of us. So we have also introduced our secure zero-touch provisioning, and we'll be going through this process of how can you go through secure ZTP in a lab later this week. So if you do have interest, be sure to reach out and you can see how ZTP is actually working. Next, we have our model-driven telemetry. So this is for our NetOps, DevOps typically. And again, this is where we can use our tooling to actually apply configuration to many different devices at scale. And then we have our image management, of course, different ways to do our image upgrades. This could be using gNMI, for example. This is the Google's protocol here. And lastly, our model-driven telemetry, which again, this is where we'll be focusing today. It includes netconf as well as the gRPC operations. So just to recap here, why are we using programmability and automation? What are the benefits of it? So when we're using programmable features, we're more efficient, we're more consistent with what we're actually able to configure, or we're able to actually create repeatable actions. And because we create repeatable actions, it makes it much easier for us to scale up and actually apply these different configurations. Maybe it's a telemetry subscription to many different devices all at once. And of course, this is secure, seamless, and smart. So let's quickly go through the different options that you have, or why you might want to use programmability in some different use cases. So we know the day 0, day 1, day 2, and day n. And now we can describe a little bit about these different use cases here. So for the first one, perhaps you have just received a shipment, an order of 5,000 new devices, and you're ready to onboard them. You need them to all have the same basic configurations, so that's where ZTP or secure ZTP actually come in. So in this case, you might not be sure exactly how to go about, onboarding all of these devices all at once. Because you have these needs, you need to be scalable and you need to be consistent here. So again, for that, we'll use the zero-touch provisioning option. And now that you actually have all of these devices and they're actually within your network, maybe you need to make a configuration change. So to do this, you'll typically use the day 1 operations and the various toolings that we have here. So this will include of course, Yang Suite, Terraform, Ansible, and PyATS as just examples that you can use for programmability and automation. And then now that we have all of our devices actually onboarded, we have them configured for our day 1. Now we want to actually monitor and view the trends over time. And this is where our model-driven telemetry comes into play. So a quick show of hands, who's using telemetry today? I see quite a few of us are. That's great. And then lastly, how can we go about actually updating these devices, updating the image on these devices at scale? This will be with things like our gNMI os.proto. So we're going to be using tools to update the software here. So overall, you can see there are many different capabilities for using programmability and automation in your own networks. And this is just a brief example of some of the operations that you have. So how do we make all of this possible? How does all of this work? We know the outcome that we want to have is we want to use programmability, and today's focus is going to be on telemetry itself, viewing the telemetry data, getting these statistics over time, and viewing trends. And we do this using the Yang data models. So is anyone using Yang today? Nice, I see a couple of us. Yes, Yang is how we're actually structuring the data that's on our iOS XE devices. Does anyone know what Yang stands for? Yes, in the back?
Yet another next gen.
Yes, exactly. Yet another next gen. So, oh, sorry. yet another next generation is actually the name for our Yang models. It's kind of a funny name here. And our Yang models are essentially the data structure that we'll be following. So you can think of the Yang data model as actually the formatting for a particular feature that you want to work with on your device. So we can compare this to the CLI. I know we had some proud CLI users here in the room today. So our CLI, this is more human-oriented. So this is when your hands on the keyboard, you're actually making maybe a configuration change or updating your devices this way. Whereas the Yang data models, these are more machine oriented, and you can even see here how this is written out. We have just one example. Typically, when you're working with Yang data models, you'll work with JSON, for example. If you're working with RESTconf, you may work with XML, with netconf, or other encodings as well. So let's get into more details about how we actually compare the CLI to the Yang. Now we're talking about telemetry, right? So how do we create a telemetry subscription? Over on the left, you'll see this is an example of the CLI that you would use to create a telemetry subscription. And who knows what this subscription would give us? Does anyone have a guess based on, what's that?
Memory statistics.
The memory statistics, exactly. We're going to collect the memory statistics here, and we can tell that based on this XPath that we're filtering by. So we're filtering out the XPath, and we're specifically interested in these memory statistics. So we'll be getting all of the memory statistics, and we'll be sending them to this receiver location over here. Now we'll get into more details of how telemetry subscriptions actually work. But this is just a brief example comparing the CLI to the Yang data model. So essentially, we're using the Yang models themselves in conjunction with the data of what we actually want to apply or configure on our device, for example. And that's how we create the various payloads that we can use to actually configure or work with our devices programmatically. So the Yang model itself is the overview or the foundation, essentially, of what the formatting should be. And then, of course, we will provide what are the features or what are the exact capabilities that we want to include here. And a little bit more about Yang. So this is the model, excuse me. This is one more example about how you can actually work with the CLI versus the Yang versus the XML. So in this case, we're talking about using netconf operations. And here we're going to be configuring a VRF, for example. So with Yang, we actually have all of the Yang models for all of the iOS XE releases available over on GitHub. And they're broken down into different categories. So the first one is there will be folders for each software release, each version release. So you can go into this folder to understand, what exactly are all of the Yang models for your devices running that particular version of iOS XE. And we've actually broken it down further, too. So here there are different types of Yang data models. And we were mentioning earlier, if we want the entire running configuration, this will be our native config model. If we want a specific feature, you may see CFG at the end, and that's for our configuration models. If you see oper at the end, that stands for your operational models, so that will be your read-only data. And essentially, this is what we want to focus on for telemetry, because our goal is to read this telemetry data and to look at the trends over time. So next we can move into SNMP and the features that we have added for SNMP mapping to Yang models over in Yang Suite. So does anyone use Yang Suite today? See a few hands here, that's great. Yang Suite is a free tooling available to actually go in and understand your different Yang models. So on the previous slides, we were talking about how you can go to GitHub to look at all the Yang models. The Yang Suite tooling actually helps you use them and build different payloads to actually be able to send those to your devices to see how programmability and automation works, how you could create maybe a new telemetry subscription, for example. And it can even work as a telemetry receiver. So if you're just starting with telemetry, you're not quite sure how it works, you can send your data to Yang Suite and actually see those packets coming in.
Is Yang Suite specific to Cisco or can you use it with other vendors' models?
Great question. So this is about, is Yang Suite available for other vendors or just Cisco? So the Yang Suite tooling, of course, this is free, publicly available to you, and the license supports the Cisco models.
What ports does Telemetry use?
What's that?
What ports? The TCP port?
Yeah, so you're asking about ports that telemetry is using, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have a slide on this coming up, sort of comparing the model-driven telemetry capabilities, but it depends on the protocol that you're actually using. I guess I don't call it out here, but I can get that information to you. So the netconf will be on the 830 typically. And of course, these can be configured too, but they're following the industry standards, following the RFCs. So now within Yang Suite, specifically focused on SNMP and our SNMP journey and trying to move away from SNMP, moving towards model-driven telemetry, we've added some capabilities into the Yang Suite tooling to actually make this possible. So within Yang Suite, there's an Analytics tab. And here you can actually select the SNMP to Yang mapping here. So for example, you could provide an OID, SNMP OID that you already know or are familiar with or are collecting. And then you'll be able to match this to the Yang model itself and compare the data. So what do I mean by that? Well, within Yang Suite, this tool actually helps you send a payload to your devices. And so one capability that you have is to request the data from your XE device through the Yang Suite and compare that to what you might be typically getting from SNMP. So again, this is just one step on your SNMP-free journey, and you can use this Yang Suite tooling to help with that. And we already have a list of some commonly known or commonly used OIDs to XPath here. And this information is, of course, publicly available to you. So if you're using any of these OIDs already, they're mapped for you, and we're continuing to add and expand upon this list. So know that this is continuing to grow. And just a little bit more here. So for example, we're calling out LACP and NTP here. And you can see that there's a total of 21 features, 21 Yang model features here. And this maps to 213 OIDs. So really there's a lot of different comparisons that you can make here. You're not necessarily on your own when going about making this process from one to the other. And then we have our SNMP OID to Yang XPath mapping workflow. So the first process, or the first step that you take here when you're mapping, is you check to see if you have a file already. So I mentioned that at Cisco, we publish a file for you. This is over in the same place where you can find all of your Yang data models over on GitHub. We have a CSV file for you that has this comparison. It has this mapping already. So you can download the file and upload it into Yang Suite to more easily visualize and compare what you actually have here. So if you have a mapping file, you can go directly to the find mappings and you can understand what's already created there, what's actually there for you in this CSV. If you don't have a mapping file yet, of course you can create your own if you know of some mappings that are interesting to you, or you can import the one that we have provided for you. And if you create one, you can use the match OIDs operation here to actually see the results of the SNMP OID again and compare that to make sure that this is the same data that you're wanting between SNMP and between model-driven telemetry. So focused on the comparison here. And of course, you can export these. You can move forward with these in whatever way makes sense for you. Yes, there's a question.
The Yang models seem to be version specific. Is there a risk of a change in any sort of schema or attributes between versions of iOS?
So you're asking about the different versions of iOS XE and how they have different Yang models. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So even on GitHub, you can see for each version we have different set of Yang models, and it's even broken down into different categories there. So yes, with every release, we're updating the Yang models to provide more features and more capabilities. So as you update your iOS XE, as you update your software, then you'll also get newer capabilities or access to additional or updated Yang models. Yes.
So I guess my question is more driven towards, is it going to break your current monitoring strategy if you upgrade?
Oh, great question. You're asking about, okay, what are the risks of upgrading, right?
Yeah.
Would something be broken if you did an upgrade? That's a great question. So we have updates to Yang models, and typically with these updates, we'll be adding to what's already existing there. So typically there will be no breaks to what's currently working for you. There are some cases where we have deprecated Yang models, and those are announced ahead of time, so we'll make sure that that information is known to you. And typically that's following any industry standards as we go through that process there. So hopefully that answers your question, but if you do have more follow-ups on Yang models and differences of versions, we can discuss that later as well. Yes?
So just to recap, basically, when you're changing versions, you're just adding new functionality, just kind of like, so everything's pretty much backwards compatible, unless it's being deprecated.
Yes, good point. So to recap here, typically you'll be gaining new features, new programmable capabilities as you upgrade your code, unless, of course, there's some deprecation that happens, which, again, will be...
So you don't necessarily have to, if you're upgrading your iOS, you don't necessarily have to go back and update your Yang models, because theoretically they should be backwards compatible.
Typically, they're backwards compatible, yes, yeah. So if you're upgrading from one image to the next, typically all of those Yang models will be available, yes. And if you do have any questions or hesitations as you are doing an upgrade and want to reach out to us, please let us know. We're happy to work with you through that process. Because of course we want you to have the confidence to upgrade your image and to get the enhanced features and further capabilities with iOS XE and programmability. Yeah, great questions. Thank you for those. So now moving back to SNMP specifically within Yang Suite, this is just a quick guide or an overview of the chart that we saw on the last slide. So just to highlight, the capabilities are that you can run your OID, so you can understand what's the data coming from your device for that particular OID that maybe you're familiar with already. And you can actually show all of the current mappings that you have available in your mappings file, so comparisons from OIDs to your Yang XPath. And you can actually make this comparison here. So when you do the match OIDs to XPath operation, you can compare that output coming from your device for the OID to the model-driven telemetry through the Yang model. And of course, you can import or export your mapping files. And you can use find mappings to work with the current files that you have within Yang Suite. So there are quite a few different capabilities that you have within Yang Suite for SNMP to help you on this journey. And again, if you do have any questions as you're getting started with Yang Suite, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help you through that process. I mentioned that this file is available over on GitHub as well. So here, for example, I'm in the 26.1 folder, and here is the CSV file that you can use within Yang Suite here. We have this for many other releases, starting with the 17.14. And yes, did you have another question?
Yeah, have you guys got anything in terms of in the works in terms of maybe AI being able to give you models? One of the biggest challenges with the AI model really is finding what you want, right? And back to mapping all the OIDs. It's actually, and there's even more AI models and it gets even more confusing. My head just spins. I end up giving up after a while. But is there anything in the works of saying, hey, you know, have an AI tool that would ultimately say, hey, I want these kinds of statistics. What model should I use? Just help me with model. Do you guys have anything in the works of that, or?
Yeah, this is a great question. So you're asking about a tooling that you can use to actually do this mapping process or to help along with this process of actually doing the mapping or understanding maybe I'm using this OID now, how can I use a different Yang model? Or maybe I'm working with this feature, what is the Yang model? That type of search. And yes, we are actually working on some documentation like this. We can actually focus, or we have a slide today on the SNMP MIBs of what is the documentation that you have there and how you can work with it. So we're providing more details, and this is a really great point of, it sounds like you're asking for a more advanced search, right? A more complex search or maybe an AI chat bot to help you find exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, so we can actually take a look at this. So this is the SNMP MIB, and this is all within our Swagger documentation. So this is very new, very fresh. Our Swagger documentation is actually focused on the REST-based APIs, and typically helping you to go through the process to actually see how can I build a payload or how can I work with this particular feature. And so we have this for actually quite a few. You can see at the top here, it's the of course, operational models is where we focused first. We're adding in the configuration as well. And you can see right now I'm on this tab specifically for the MIBs, right? So we want to see more details about what we can actually get from the MIBs. And of course, this is coming from the Yang data model itself. So along with this, I think you make a great point is, yes, we will continue to advance with AI, how you can actually work with the Yang data models or how you can actually build up payloads and making that documentation available to you. So you can actually go here today to, or scan the QR code to go to at least the home page here. And then right now I've just selected the MIB for AAA, but if you scroll down on this list, you'll actually be able to see many here. If it's not in the slide deck, then I will post it right after the session to make sure it's there. Yeah, so I see a few of you are using the QR code here. We can also take a quick look together. Okay, so hopefully you can read this here. Essentially, I'm within this Cisco DevNet page. And here there are many different tabs at the top that are giving me different information about Yang data models. And here I'm in this MIB tab. So here I'm curious to know more about our MIB data, or MIB APIs. So yeah, one thing I did here was just to show this AAA server MIB. So you can see in the typical Swagger documentation, if you're familiar with REST API calls, is you have like a GET, for example. So this is showing you how you can actually create the GET. So with RESTconf, with REST API calls, typically you'll have a device, maybe this is an IP or host name, and then after that you'll have the port, and then you'll have the /data and the actual data that you want to get. So in this case, we're looking at our AAA server MIB information. Then of course you can see what this will look like. So this is, of course, assuming we sent this payload to our device, we sent the GET and said, hey, give us this information. Assuming, of course, that we had RESTconf set up and that we were authorized to use RESTconf to do a read like this, you can limit, the types of reads or users that are allowed to do that. But this is the data, or this is essentially the format of the data or the Yang model itself, what this would look like. So yeah, this is one step towards increasing the visibility in the documentation. And I can go to the top here. Of course, I'm focused on MIBs and SNMP because that's the focus of today's talk. But I can briefly show as well within this same page. This is the home page here. And overall, it's broken down into these different tiles. So when we're talking about telemetry, when we want to get data from our device, again, using these operational data models, we can go specifically to the operational data, and this will be filled with mostly, GETs, right? We're going to be receiving data from our device. We're going to be asking it for data here. So again, you can see over here, this is like how I am doing the comparison, right? We were just looking at the SNMP MIB for what is the data, what does it look like, what would we actually get back if we did the GET. And similarly, we can look at this for our Yang data as well. So it's, again, in the same format where you would put your IP or host name, port /data, and then we would have the Yang XPath, or right, the Yang model essentially would be listed here. So they're very, very similar in the approach here, but again, just another way to see these side by side. And there is a search included with this, and we're continuing to enhance it and work on this documentation. So yes, great question. Any other questions on this section before moving back to the slides?
So you're focused on XE. Do you also cover XR and XOS? Not sure what the software would be for your firewalls, but is that information also there, or is that coming?
Oh yeah, great question. So you're asking about this documentation in particular, right? This documentation is for iOS XE to start, but yeah, this is a great point that we can expand it as well, too. And there are some other resources within the Cisco DevNet as well. That's so that's where this site is hosted here. But over on Cisco DevNet, we have a lot of Swagger documentation for example, Catalyst Center, right? That's the area where you typically go, always to Cisco DevNet to look at these types of API documentations. Yeah, of course.
How long have you guys had this Swagger documentation? Has it been out a while?
It's been out a few months. I think we first announced it, sorry? It's pretty fresh, yeah. I think we first announced it at Cisco Live EMEA, so February. And of course, again, as you're working with the Swagger documentation over here, if you have any feedback, let us know. We're continuously looking for ways to evolve and make it even more useful for you.
Do you have any tools that you recommend that can interface with these Yang models via the different protocols?
Yeah, great question. So you're asking about how can we work with tools to interface with our Yang data models. So the first one I would recommend is probably focusing on Yang Suite, because within Yang Suite you have the netconf, restconf, gNMI, and gRPC options. So there's different protocols that you can use within Yang Suite to work with all of the Yang models. So typically my workflow would be, maybe I have a device, it's on the specific version that is relevant to me or maybe a few other devices. I'll grab all of the Yang models for that device, and then I'll be able to build up a payload. For example, if I wanted to create a netconf operation, a config change, then I would go through Yang Suite to actually build that payload and push it to my device.
Yeah, sorry, I meant like to replace SolarWinds or Science Logic and visualize the data, the telemetry that's coming back in order to clean, and make decisions on what data we're seeing.
Oh, you're talking about a visualization tooling, is that right? Yes, okay, sorry, I think I was focused too much on the Yang, but you're talking about how to actually see the data. Yes, we have Docker container that has Telegraph, Influx, and Grafana in it. And so Grafana, in that case, is your visualization tool where you can build custom dashboards. And I actually have a brief demo on Splunk, too, so we can dive right into that if it's interesting as well.
I assume that was the answer, just didn't know if there was a commercial available solution.
Yeah.
Some of us need a 1-800-1.
Got it, yes, the commercial solution.
Visualization?
Grafana is one visualization. This is a open source, freely available tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The question I have is and I'm not a SolarWinds guru by any network engineer. It's managed by another team. I don't really care for it. But does SolarWinds support model-driven telemetry? No. Okay. And the other thing I got a question for, right, is that model-driven telemetry is really cool, right? I like it. It sounds sexy. It's great. But when you go to try to set it up and you look at how SNMP is so simple, what can model-driven telemetry provide me that SNMP can? I know that you say that it's richer, but a statistic is a statistic, so I don't know how much more richer you can get because it's the same data. So I'm just curious, what is it that MDT can provide me versus SNMP?
Yeah, so your question is about essentially why is model-driven telemetry better than SNMP, or why should you start on this journey, right? Yeah, so this kind of goes back to our first slide here where we were looking at the comparison, right? Just getting more data. But of course, this goes back to the particular features that you're interested in. Typically with SNMP, it will take, a few seconds to get the data back when you're doing a poll. With the model-driven telemetry, it's very near real time, so you're getting the data much faster. And again, it's much more data that you're getting within that shorter period of time. So that's really the value or the advantage of MDT over SNMP.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So typically with SNMP, if we want to get an instantaneous result, like an interface is up or down or power supply failure, we have to depend upon traps, so we have to wait on the. So does this method give us the means to have instantaneous notification that an interface has changed state?
Yeah, so you're asking about an on-change operation, right? You want to see when your interface has flapped, right?
Is this programmable into the device, or is this something that's programmable into the collection system?
Yeah, this is a good question. So we have on-change operations. Typically, I'm showing in these examples, they're mostly periodic. So I'm looking, for example, at, say, the trend of CPU over time. But if you want to get this on-change data, we do have some support for on-change as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
It does. Specifically, I'm looking for things like, has a member of my port channel come out?
Yeah, you want to see how things are flapping, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And there are two, this is a good point, there are two main ways to collect telemetry data. One is the periodic, so you're constantly getting the data regardless of what's going on, versus the on-change.
You might have said this, but what's the coverage like? So all the data that you can get via SNMP, you have 100% coverage, or you can get that same data?
Let me double check on that for you. My understanding is yes. But yeah, all of the data models are available to you to see all of that data that you can get, yes.
And is that using the open config version of the Yang models or Cisco's DME version of it?
Oh, great question. So you're asking about what's the difference between, our open config support and coverage versus Cisco native, right? And so, of course, with Cisco native, we have more coverage there, yes. We actually have a few slides on some innovations that we have within open config, because we're continuing to invest in our open config, and again, this is vendor agnostic, Yang data models that we support. So if you have multi-vendor networks, right, we're there to support you through that. And if you have any questions or see any gaps, right, let us know, and we'll work to close those.
Be interested in that coverage comparison with the open config version of the Yang models.
Yeah, this is a good point, is like, what is the difference between the the native coverage versus the open config coverage? And again, all of this is listed in the GitHub and also in this new Swagger documentation. We're working to build this up to make sure that it has the complete coverage of both the native and the open config there. And then, yes, another question.
Follow up on the gentleman's question about traps, SNMP traps. So if we're trying to get rid of SNMP, coverage for traps would really be critical. Because we're going to spend the time to collect via the model-driven telemetry, we're probably going to want to get traps covered by that same mechanism, just for future reference.
Yeah, this is a really great point. It's the focus on SNMP traps as well. Yes, thank you. Okay, so now we're getting back into the slides a little bit. A lot of great questions. Thank you. Please keep those coming. We can shift gears a little bit and focus more on the telemetry side. That's the main focus of today's session, and there's already been quite a few questions on it, so we can get right into that, and then into the innovation as well that we've done specifically with things like OpenConfig, right, or other tools that you can use to help you along your SNMP-free journey. So I know a few of us in here are already using model-driven telemetry. So just at a high level, this is typically the workflow. In this case, at the very top here, we have our Cisco, our IOS XE devices. And from these devices, we have a telemetry subscription on them. So if you remember back to the CLI comparison to Yang, we were looking at a memory statistics. That was a memory statistics subscription, essentially. So from our device, we were sending that memory data somewhere. And so now we're going to take a closer look at where are we sending it. In this case, I'm focused on completely free open source solution here, where the first step is we're sending the data from our device to Telegraph. And Telegraph will format our data in a way that we can easily store it into a database. In this case, I'm using InfluxDB or Influx database. And simply because this is a time series database, and again, it's free, publicly available to use. And then we're sending the data from InfluxDB. We're actually creating queries within Grafana to build up dashboards. And so I think this was a question earlier about what is Grafana, or what does it look like? Essentially, this is one example here about how you can create custom dashboards. So you can create, say, 4 or 5 telemetry subscriptions on your device. Then you can actually visualize these over within Grafana by looking at the trends over time here.
Is that the recommended time series that we use, or Prometheus, things like that?
Oh yeah, good question. You're asking if this is a recommended time series database. We will default to your chosen database. This is just the one that we happen to pick for this example here. Yeah, we're not going to say you need to use one or the other. For this one in particular, this Telegraph, Influx, and Grafana, or TIG stack, we do have a Docker container, so it's very easy for you to get this data from your device into the Docker container to then visualize all of your data. That's the only reason I bring it up here.
And what part is inside that Docker container?
There's 3 components, so this is the Telegraph, Influx, and Grafana, all of them.
All in that single Docker.
Yes, yeah, and you can go to the links here to actually look at Docker Hub to pull down this container and try it out yourself, right? You can send data from, say, your switches into this Docker container, and then we'll be able to actually visualize or look at that data within Grafana. So a little bit more about telemetry itself. We have our dial in and our dial out operations. So with dial in, this is more of a publication subscription method. And with our dial out, this is a push-based system. So back to, say, our CPU example. When we have CPU or memory data, we just want to push that over to our receiver at some period, at some frequency. Maybe it's 1 minute, maybe it's every 5 minutes or so. So we can get sort of like a pulse on what exactly is happening. What does this data look like? So that would be the dial out, the push-based. And then we've talked just briefly about these different operations that we have, the netconf, restconf, gNMI, and gRPC. So with netconf, you have the dial in operation here. With restconf, there's not exactly a subscription because REST doesn't support subscribe, but you could create a series of gets if that's something you're interested in, if you want to use restconf in particular. For gNMI, we have the dial in over the gRPC tunnel. And for gRPC specifically, we have the dial out, which is again the push-based. And most of the examples that we'll go through today will be focused on this push-based gRPC operation. And now you may be wondering, okay, what are all of these things? What do they mean? What are the differences between them, and how do I choose? We have this overall comparison here that kind of goes through each of these different operations that you have for telemetry with iOS XE to help you make that decision, because there's no one way is better than the other, right? We're trying to enable you with different ways or different capabilities. For example, some customers are already using netconf, and so they want to stick with that, right? If they're already using netconf for configuration, they want to stick with that for their telemetry as well. Others, we're seeing sort of a shift or a trend of moving towards using the Google, either the gRPC or the gNMI. And the reason for that is simply it's faster. You can get the data a little bit faster, right, than using the netconf or polling with restconf. And there was the question earlier on change, so here's the visual that goes along with it. Typically today we're going to be talking about this periodic operation, so at some time, frequency, or interval, we'll be collecting the data here. Whereas on change, that would be like if something happened, then you want to be notified about it, or then you want to see the update. And so that could be, for example, someone tries to log in unsuccessfully, or right there's some interface flapping, or something like this. You want to see the changed state here. So moving on to our telemetry subscriptions here. Typically, if we're, yeah, yes.
The stack, the container stack, what protocol does that use? Or does it support all of them?
Sorry, were you asking about Docker container?
Your Telegraph,
Oh,
Suite, and Grafana, what protocol stack are you using?
Oh yeah, what are we using there? Yeah, so for that one, for the Docker container, we're expecting this gRPC subscription here. So the idea is you create a telemetry subscription, which we'll get into next, what that looks like. And then that data will be sent to your Docker container, and then you can visualize it in Grafana.
So, I don't want to sound overly negative, but right now there's a lot of vulnerabilities with Cisco IOS XE and any sort of exposed web interface. With those protocols using HTTP2 or HTTP in general, that means you're exposing a web interface. Is that something that we're concerned about or should be concerned about with all these adversaries targeting those web interfaces?
This is a great question. You're asking about what are the security implications, right? Like, should we be using these things if these ports are exposed? And essentially we have, of course, we're continuing to advance our security operations and what's actually possible here. So for some customers, that the security is very important, right? And so we need things like mutual TLS to actually, sorry?
For some?
Oh, for all.
Okay.
For all customers, yes. So we have the mutual TLS support, and we're continuing to enhance our security with these protocols as well. Yeah, great question. No, this is a great question. A great question about security, and this is something that maybe we could, have a follow-up discussion offline too afterwards if you're interested, right? We can talk about what might be the best option for telemetry, what might be the best option for programmability, with, of course, all of these security concerns that you may have. So moving forward with our our section here, we have, this is how you would show processes CPU if you're on CLI. I know there are many fans of CLI in here today. And typically how this works is, of course, you would get the data, you would see it, and then you would probably log off, right? You're done. But if you need to do this at scale, it can be pretty time consuming. Oh, let me go here. So in this case, I have multiple different devices, and I'm going to log into each one of them and actually run the same show command. So ultimately, what we're trying to get at is, with 6 devices, okay, maybe not too bad, but as we move forward, right, this becomes more and more difficult to scale. And again, this is why we're moving towards using model-driven telemetry. So again, this is the comparison of the CLI to the Yang. And in this case, we're looking at our CPU data. So here I'm creating a telemetry subscription for all of these different devices, and I'm creating the CPU utilization subscription over here. Then we're able to view all of that data into a single pane of glass. So in this case, we're looking at Grafana. We've created some dashboard over here. We're looking at all of the data. And how do you actually know what the XPath is, or how do you filter by that XPath for that certain feature that you're interested in? This goes back to the Yang Suite tooling, where here we're looking again for our CPU data. And you can see we have our prefix and our XPath. So this will always give you the correct information about how to collect this data. It'll be in this format: filter by your XPath filter by your prefix : XPath here. And there is a configuration guide as well that shows the details of this. And yes, you had a question?
Yeah, is there, I know a lot of our software defined networking things like Disneyland, ENP, and things like or dashboard using NDI. Is there a way to take a look at what XPath or each of those are using? Is there already pushing
Sorry, are you asking about different Cisco?
products?
Yes, yeah, that's all supported within Yang Suite, yes. Yeah, the Cisco Yang models for NX, XR, IOS XE, they're all supported here within Yang Suite, yes.
Yeah, is there a way to kind of map into understand what XPath is using, so that we can probably put that if we wanted to say push it to another homegrown tooling, just like that too.
So you're asking about different software, how you can look at that within Yang Suite, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so typically how this will work is right now I've created like a Yang set here at the top, and within this Yang set, I have all the different Yang models for this device, for example. So you would have a different Yang set for your different operating system, and it would have the Yang models that are supported by that operating system. Yeah, hopefully that's clear, but if there are more questions, let me know too. Yes.
So in the midst of the telemetry that we're doing with Yang, is there a way to do it differently with our NetFlow, or is NetFlow still NetFlow and telemetry is just telemetry?
Yeah, this is a good question about NetFlow. Yes, let me actually circle back with you on that. We're not actually covering that in the Yang data models. But yeah, please follow up with me afterwards. We can get more into it. So this is using Yang Suite to actually create or pick out the XPath that we need for this particular feature. And then now we can actually see, okay, how do we create the telemetry subscription? And again, this is what's going on our device itself. This is the config that we add. And we have many, many different examples of telemetry subscriptions that you can create and different ways that you can go about that over on GitHub as well. So if you want to see examples of that or how to set it up, there are those available to you. Now, earlier we were talking about Telegraph, Influx, and Grafana. Now we have a slightly different workflow where we're going from our device to some translation level. So in this case, we could be using Telegraph, we could be using Open Telemetry, but essentially we're trying to get our data over into Splunk. So this is the workflow that we're going to go through. So let me just navigate back here. So here you can see I'm within Splunk. I have a Splunk Enterprise running over here. And there are many different dashboards or capabilities that we actually have. So I just want to look at a couple of them. Let's see if they're created here. So this one is actually looking at my environment, power, sensors, temperature, PoE, all of this good stuff. And essentially how this is working is we have different telemetry subscriptions. And within those subscriptions, there's different data points or leafs. And I'm using those to actually create these different panels or these views. And again, this is how we can very quickly and easily see the trends over time or actually compare what's going on between different devices within our network, for example. So this one is focused on our environment sensors. We also have some that are more of an overview here. So again, looking at our CPU utilization, looking at our temperature. And we have one more I just wanted to highlight here. This one is our overall system health. So again, CPU, we're looking at different capabilities here. And yes, another question?
Since Splunk is licensed on data volume, have you guys done any sort of cost analysis on the additional costs required to model your network using telemetry data?
That's a good question. I don't have those statistics about the costs here, but that's a great next step that we should definitely include next time. Yeah, sorry, I don't have those answers for you today.
Thank you.
That was great feedback. And so this is just an overview again of these different dashboards here and examples of how you can create and customize your own dashboards within Splunk as another use case. And again, this is just a review of the dashboards that we were just looking at here. So now getting into some of the examples and innovations that we have, again, to help with your SNMP-free journey. As of 26.1, so this is our latest release of iOS XE, we're supporting the gNMI for both pull and once subscriptions. So in the past, we have supported sample for gNMI, and now we're also supporting pull and once operations. So here you can see within the Yang Suite tooling itself, we're looking from the gNMI view. We're going to subscribe here, and then we have these different operations, the stream once or pull, and again, we'll be looking at sample or on change here. So in this case, for stream, which we have supported previously, this is push-based, and then for the pull and the once, these are both, pull-based, if you will. And so essentially, we're requesting the data specifically from our device, and then it's returning that to us. So just one more way that you can work with your data or get telemetry data from your devices. It does not have to be push-based. You don't have the pull operation.
Is this only supported in 26?
This is now supported in 26. So the pull and the once are the new pieces for 26.1, yes.
So minimum 26?
Yes. Minimum 26 to work with the pull or the once. And I can go back and look at the release where we first supported Stream, but that was a while back. Yeah, so Stream has been supported for quite a while for gNMI. So this is just an example of how you can actually use or work with this. We have our gNMI once for CPU. So again, I'm over in Yang Suite. I want to do a subscribe once. And what once means is basically just give me the data one time. So it's very similar to a get operation in that sense, but this is the overall view of what is the CPU data that you're being returned. With the pull, it's same data, but a slightly different way that you're receiving it. So again, we're doing the subscribe. We've changed this to pull. And now every time we send a message, hey, I want this data, we will receive it back in that same pull from our device. We also have some examples here about using once with a new open config interface. There's a new leaf that we introduced again in 26.1. So going back to a question from earlier about Yang models and how are they updated, typically this is the process where for open config, for example, for interfaces, we have added an additional leaf, this new management leaf. So we can run through this command to actually get this data once. And this is the reply that we actually get, that the status was true. It's a new management leaf. And similarly, we can do the same with another leaf. So I'm just highlighting here some updates that we've had in OpenConfig recently. And this one is we're looking at our interface state logical here. So same thing, I'm going to send this payload, and then I will get this subscribe reply. In this case, it's false from my device. We also have the gNMI poll interfaces. This is for CPU, for example. So with poll, essentially, we still have this session like ready to go to send the poll request to our device. We just need to keep adding to keep polling. So we can take a quick look at what does this actually look like here. For poll, I sent the request. You can see all of this data is coming in. So we sent our gNMI poll. And we're able to get all of this information for all of our interfaces. Once we go to the bottom, you can see here, this is the timestamp or the request. And now if we want to actually target this poll again, run it again, I'll just press enter here. And I'll say, yes, I want to send it to the subscription, and you'll see we'll get that same data back, but we have a new timestamp. So if anything has changed, we've gotten all of this interface data once again. So that's essentially how the poll operation works. And of course, you typically wouldn't be typing, right, to do this. You may have some polling operation set up, right, on a particular interval. So you may want to poll every 5 minutes, for example, and you could walk through the same workflow that we have here. And there's a question about security earlier. Of course, this is top of mind. So some enhancements that we've had is to restrict our gNXI services to a specific VRF. So now this is possible as well as with service level ACL support. So again, this is top of mind. We're continuing to add different innovations within, who can access things and what exactly can they access. So again, new feature over here with the service level ACL. And we can see a quick example of how this actually works over here. So for example, in this case, I'm going to do a very basic example. I just want to request the host name. And so I'm sending my request, and because my ACL is allowing my host here to actually access my switch, then I see the response is returned. Now, if I change that and say, okay, deny from the host, what we'll see here is I did the request, but I got denied. So again, because I had this configuration deny from the host, and this is where I'm sending the gNMI request from, then you'll see that my connection is restricted by the ACL. So I wasn't actually able to get that data because I didn't have the permission, I didn't have the access. Yes, question?
So the person that queries to get the response back that it was denied because of ACL?
In this case, I'm just showing a brief example here of how this would work. But of course, yeah, you can set this up to interact differently as needed. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure. But we can discuss this one in more too.
I think you probably don't want to tell them why it was denied, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a point.
Got it. Yeah, that's good feedback. I will take this one away. Thank you.
So when the request is denied by ACL like that, is that a TCP reset and the session is not started, or is this going through all of the TLS negotiation and then providing a response that was denied by ACL?
That's a great question. I'll have to get back to you on the exact, I guess, workflow over here that you're asking for. But yeah, this will be the rejected by the ACL. I'm not sure that that's answering your question.
A TCP reset rejection is a lot more secure than opening the HTTP session, doing TLS negotiations, exposing all of that software to potential exploit.
That's a good point, yes. I will need to check on that, so please follow up with me on this one, and we can get more details on it. And just to kind of recap some of the innovation that we have here. So this is for the OpenConfig Yang model updates. So of course we have some updates to many different OpenConfig models here. And I just wanted to highlight these are the models that were updated. But if you want to see the nitty-gritty details, if you're interested in looking at this, we actually have over on GitHub a very detailed view of all of the Yang models that have been updated for 26.1, so our most recent code, and a specific version or files over here for the OpenConfig in particular. So if you're wanting to get into the nitty-gritty details, this is available to you.
So we can download Yang update from GitHub, right?
Sorry?
We can download Yang from, we can download the Yang update, with the Telemetry models from GitHub, right? It's not.
Yeah, you can download Yang from GitHub, exactly, yes. And then this is also more details, more documentation about what exactly has changed within these OpenConfig Yang models, yeah.
I'm going to do it, so
Yeah, you'll do it, okay, great. Now we have some tooling. So I know that we have been through some of this tooling already. We've already talked about the SNMP MIB, the Swagger documentation over here. Just as a reminder, it's freely available to you. We talked about Yang Suite, specifically with the SNMP capabilities over here. And within Yang Suite as well, typically you'll do a pip install to get Yang Suite, or you'll work with the Docker container. But we also have a learning lab that's available to you. And throughout this week, we have a few learning lab sessions that you can actually go through to work directly with Yang Suite tooling over here. We also have examples on Ansible. So you can see how to work with Ansible to actually apply a specific configuration over here. Again, more details on Yang Suite, how you can actually go in and install it over here. And more details on the Ansible. So we have the iOS config and the iOS command. So this works with the netconf, the restconf, and the gNMI interfaces. We also have a session on Ansible throughout this week if you want to get some hands-on with it. And I do have some more details of Ansible in the slides that I'll share with you, but just for the purposes of time, I'll skip over them for now. Know that these are there for you to actually review, though. We also have a Terraform tooling. So is anyone using Terraform today? Okay, nice. So Terraform is this is actually an imperative approach to configuration management. So instead of, for example, using CLI to describe exactly what you want to see line by line, with the declarative approach, sorry, Terraform is declarative. With this approach, you describe the how of what you actually want. What is that end result here? So we have some details on infrastructure as code as a whole. And we also have a Terraform iOS XE provider. So there are many different providers out there. This one works specifically with your enterprise networking devices. And we also have an update from the last time, if you may have heard about Terraform for iOS XE before. The update is that it now is working with netconf operations, and netconf is the default with Terraform for iOS XE. Previously, we had supported restconf only, and now we support netconf as well. Again, all of this documentation is available to you.
So, XR question again, someone asked that before. Are you guys just going to build a provider, Terraform provider for XR?
Great question. I'm not sure about the roadmap for an additional provider for different software, but I can try to get you in contact with the right folks who may know about that.
Thank you.
Sure. And since we're talking about telemetry, model-driven telemetry, we do have an example for how to use Terraform to create some model-driven telemetry subscriptions. So you can create many different subscriptions all at once using the links here. So this is briefly the workflow. This is right now within a Docker container itself. And here you can grab this Docker container, right? You can pull it down, and then we can analyze actually what's inside it. We can go ahead and get inside the Docker TIG MDT over here. This is what we were referring to before about the Telegraph Influx and Grafana being all included together. So now we can take a look at the files, and we can actually replace this with our own credential here for our device that we might want to configure. And again, in this case, we're going to add some telemetry subscriptions over here. So we can look at the plan to confirm that yes, this is what we want to actually push to our device. Once we confirm that, you can see there were 5 new things added, and we can actually see that those are the new telemetry subscriptions that were created on our device. So just a quick start about how you can get ready and start using Terraform if that's of interest to you. And sometimes we get this question about which one should I use, Ansible or Terraform? And it's not necessarily one over the other. They actually both can work together. It really depends on your use case. And just a brief comparison about these different toolings. So this is the Yang Suite, Ansible, and Terraform, and how you can use each of them over here. And sorry, was there another question?
So if you're not in a greenfield environment, so one of the things you just mentioned was state. The thing about Terraform is that it's very difficult to reverse engineer state. So if you don't build from the start with Terraform and consistently use Terraform forever, you're going to lose state, right? I don't know if you want to put on that or not.
That's a good point. You're talking about Terraform and state, how that's very important here. So with the Terraform state, typically you're right. If you're using Terraform and you want the state to have value, you would need to keep or continue using Terraform. You can start using Terraform. It doesn't have to be day 0, but you could start using Terraform, and then from that point it would collect the state or know the state. So if you ever apply some configuration that you decide, hey, I don't want this, you can then request that Terraform will unconfigure that based on the state file that it has saved.
So can you I mean, to your point, can you maintain idle modes with state configuration?
We can talk more about state offline, or you're welcome to discuss it, but I'll just wrap up briefly here. So overall, we do have some tips and tricks for when you're starting your SNMP-free journey here. So typically, we'll always recommend that you use the latest, greatest code here, and also to start small. So you don't need to convert everything from SNMP to model-driven telemetry today, but maybe starting with just one feature or one item first that's most important to you, and then moving forward from there. And typically, if you are just getting started, then we recommend sort of going through or answering some of the questions such as, where do I want to store my data and how do I want to visualize it, to help understand what tools you may want to use. And again, we do have some comparisons and some views of the different options that you do have. And also planning for the future. So if you know of a lot of different SNMP OIDs that you want to have mapped, for example, maybe you're just starting with one today, but feel free to work with us or share that with us as well, and we're happy to help you on your journey. So the sooner you share those lists with us, the better, and we can help you out. And also, don't be afraid to ask for help as you're going throughout this journey. I know it's a big step, and you may have a lot of questions. There's a lot of great interactive discussion today, so thank you for that. And we'd love to connect further. So there are resources that are in this deck, but I just want to leave you with this one, which is the sessions that we have for the rest of the week, all on programmability and automation for enterprise networking. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your attention and for being here today, and I hope that we chat soon. Thank you.